Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Jittery. I'm here from Cornell Cooperative Extension. I'm very glad to welcome you to another one of our Lunch in the Garden programs. And we've been doing these on Wednesdays since the beginning of the pandemic, so we have quite a track record of them. And we're very glad to have you here today. We will be archiving this recording on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and type in Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County, you can get to our YouTube channel, and this should be posted. I'm not so sure when, but sometime in the future. Today, we're very lucky to have one of our master gardeners here today. Her name is Janis Fallon, and Janis is a very enthusiastic herbalist. She studied herbs quite extensively. She's done a number of herb programs. She's got an herb group that meets out at the Brunswick Library. And she's going to talk to us today about backyard medicine or what you can find in your lawn to eat. And maybe you can tell I'm very, very sick today, so I should have followed the recommendations of this PowerPoint, but fortunately I didn't. But everybody here today can avoid this cold that I have. So thank you, Janis, for being here.
Well, welcome everybody. This is a fun talk because my favorite herbs tend to be the ones that grow around me. The herbs that grow in my lawn, the one that grows along the border. So I wasn't sure if I should call this talk Eat Your Lawn, but I ended up with backyard medicine because I thought maybe that sounds a little less scary for people. Let me just get my there. So what I thought we'd talk a little bit about today is foraging, which is when you're eating wild plants that you didn't plant. It's also called wildcrafting and pretty much the same thing. We'll talk a little bit about what parts of plants do you use and when, easy plants you can get started with, and then a few of my favorite herbs. And if you've been to any of my talks, one of the things I love to do is tell some stories and folklore, and as well as the health and wellness benefits of the herbs. So I always start first by inviting in our ancestors, because we're going to share some of their stories, some of their wisdom, some of their craziness. And I also like to invite in our plant teachers and their wisdom and what they share with us.
Oh, one last thing I should say, sorry, Janis,
Yes.
is that if anybody has a question, if you want to type it in the chat box, we'll answer those at the end. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that sounds good. So one of my favorite herbalists calls foraging dancing with the land. And I think that's so appropriate because it connects us to the earth. It connects us to what is growing around us, what is the season, what is coming up. So we're going to dance with the land today. But why do we want to eat the plants that grow around us? Why do we want to forage? Why do we want to wildcraft? And I think part of it is the plants that grow around us, especially some that are coming up in the spring, are such healthy, nutrient-rich foods. It's inexpensive. You didn't plant it and it's growing there. But it's also using food as medicine. The plants that can give us health and wellness and help us in some of our daily first aid. It lets us follow our ancestors, connect with the earth. And for me, it makes me get outdoors. And we're going to talk a lot about things that are called weeds. And that's really not a scientific term. It usually means something you didn't plant, maybe something you didn't want to show up in your lawn, or something that's invasive. And so we're going to look at those in a new way. And I think wildcrafting, being outdoors, is just pure joy. So just a little of the basics. One, when you're going out to your lawn or in an area and you're picking plants, one, you don't want to do it if you're doing it for health and wellness where chemicals or sprays are being used. Away from roadways, because a lot of these plants are actually very good in remediation and cleanup, and they soak up some of the toxins and contaminants. Also, it's good to ask permission if it's not your land, because these days, you know, you can pull in somebody's driveway, they might shoot at you. The other thing is know what the plant is. A lot of the plants we're going to talk about today are very easy to identify, but sometimes there are plants that look close but they're toxic, and so you want to have a good guide or make sure you know what plant it is. So that's why it's nice to start with the easy ones and keep it simple. Now, regenerative harvesting, I think it just means you don't go in an area and take everything. By your harvesting, you're actually helping plants come back, be thicker. And I like the Native American saying about walk by the first scene, leave the eighth for the animals, and take the ninth. But again, if it's something that's endangered or rare, don't take it. Maybe you can buy and plant your own in your garden and help propagate it. Usually, you only take about a third of a plant. And when you do harvest or wildcraft, do it with gratitude. Take your time, enjoy being part of the land that grows and the plants that grow around you. Now, what parts do we use? When we're trying to use a flower as an herb, we usually want it when it's just starting to open or it's at its most vibrant. It's usually good to do it after the dew evaporates, so it's not all wet, but before the hot sun and it's starting to fade. I don't wash the plants. I shake off any of the bugs. And usually if I'm using fresh plants, I use them fairly quick, but you can keep them in a covered container for a couple days. Now, leaves are similar. A lot of times too with leaves, when they're younger, they're usually less bitter if it's something you want to eat as food. Now, seeds are usually used when they're mature and ripe, not before they've gotten hard as stone. But you can see in the picture here, this is a plantain, which is a weed. And later in the summer, the stalks come up and they have beautiful seeds. So we'll talk about it in a minute. Now, roots are usually best after a hard frost because at that time, the energy is going back down into the root. Earlier, a lot of the energy has been put into the plant and the flowers, and now it's being pulled back in. And again, fruit when it's ripe. So one of my favorite things to do in spring and early summer is just go out and make a spring vinegar. Now this one, a spring vinegar, is just wonderful for your health. So many of the plants coming up in the spring are just so nutrient dense, and the vinegar tastes good. You can use it in cooking. And these are just a few. If you look like the top, the white flower is chickweed. And chickweed's a beautiful spring herb, low to the ground. And it's one it doesn't preserve well. So it's wonderful to use it and throw it in things, pestos, salads, when it comes up in the spring. We're going to talk a little bit about violets and how wonderful they are as a spring herb. I also might throw in, I walk around and look, I might have cleavers, I might have purslane. I look for edible weeds, and then I go see what's poking up in my garden. And right now I have a little thyme coming up. I see a little hint of mint and lemon balm. And all I do is I pick these, put them in a jar, cover them with a really nice apple cider vinegar. I shake it for about 6 weeks and then strain off the plants, and it will last a long time. But again, food is medicine and it tastes good. So what I wanted to do is pick about 6 of my favorite herbs coming up and tell you some stories about them, how they can be used for health and wellness. And at the end, I have my email. So again, you can email if you'd like a copy of the presentation. I have a bunch of recipes you can have, and I'll tell you about a few more things. Now, I should warn you too, that as an herbalist, my definition of what an herb is going to be different than a scientist. A scientist will tell you, a botanist will say an herb is an herbaceous plant. It has a stem, it has leaves. But as an herbalist, our definition of what is an herb is a plant that's good for you. So now you can see we might be talking about trees, we might be talking about roots, we might be talking about seeds. And we're going to see a few of those in a minute. But a beautiful spring herb that's coming up is violets. And violets, I think when I look at herbs, I like to go and study some of the stories, some of the folklore, some of the ways our ancestors used them. And then instead of saying, oh, that's a weed, I'm like, oh, isn't this funny? It's got provenance, it has stories. And in Greek mythology, there's a story about Zeus who fell in love with Ione, but he was married to Hera. And he was afraid Hera was going to be jealous, and you don't mess with gods and goddesses. So Zeus, he turned Ione into a beautiful white heifer. Now, she was not thrilled being turned into a white cow. But Zeus said he made her tears turn into violets so that she would have beautiful things to eat. So I'm not sure if she was thrilled yet, but that's one of the violet stories. It's also been an emblem of other gods and goddesses. It's said that flowers bring good fortune, and if you put a flower in your shoe and wear it for 7 days, you're going to find your true love. You're going to have prosperity. And it's also been used a lot in love potions to ease grief and lift the spirits. Now, Hildegard von Bingen was an abbess in Germany, and she was one of the first probably recorded herbalists, and she used violets in wine and said it was good for any melancholy with a discontented mind, which would then harm your lungs. So it's been used for thousands of years. It's also a big flower around May Day, which is May 1st, and it's used in the maypoles. It's used in bouquets and crowns. And it's said if you wear a fairy crown on a full moon, you will meet the king and queen of the fairy world. So where you have violets, the fairies gather. Now, the other thing I talk about is spiritual uses. And when I talk about using a plant spiritually, you might be using a flower essence, you might be smelling an essential oil, or you just might be sitting with the plant and just really looking at it, getting to know it. What kind of energy does it give off? Or sitting having a cup of tea and just really tasting it and being in the moment. So violet has been used a lot for just happiness, relaxation. And it's a good one if you feel lonely, even when you're in a crowd. And it helps open you up, feel warmth, strength, and be able to interact with others, but protect yourself. So let's get to know violet and how we might be able to use it for our health and wellness. We can use all parts of the violet, the leaf, the flower, and the root. And when I talk about energetics, just like people, some people are fiery and hot, some are cool, calm. Some people, plants also have energetics. So a violet is very cooling. It's going to be moistening. Pungent means it's spicy, and usually that gets things flowing, and a bitter is usually good for digestion. And why I might want to know energetics is, say, it's very hot. I have a hot fever. Instead of just saying, oh, I think echinacea might be good, I could say instead, oh, I'm hot. What would be an herb I could have that's going to cool me down, that's going to be moistening for a scratchy throat, scratchy eyes? So again, if you know a little bit about the energy of an herb, it helps you find its use and when it's best for you to use it. But violets aren't just good for people. The fritillary butterflies, that's what they lay their larvae on. And a lot of pollinators are going to use violets. So some of the modern uses and ways people use violets is, as we said, it's very soothing, very restorative. So it is going to clear heat, and you can actually make up wash, strong tea, put it on a swelling. Your respiratory system, and David should be having some violet tea right now. It's good for sinuses, bronchitis. It acts as an expectorant for your lungs to clear them. It's good for heart health and cardiovascular, cholesterol. It's also very soothing and gentle for digestion in your gut health. Nervous system, it's wonderful if you're stressed, if you need some calming, especially really good for people that are very inflexible or get very red in the face and need some cooling down. It's also wonderful for dryness, skin, joints, antioxidant, antiseptic, good eye wash, lymph. And they're even doing studies on violet and some of its properties on drug-resistant cancer. And I put in the italics there, any warnings, anything I've found when I'm studying and looking up an herb. And basically, you're not going to use violets for something where you got chills or cold. Because again, remember, it's cooling, it's chilling. So you don't want to add a cooling herb to a cooling condition. And if you ate large amounts, you might have an upset stomach. So violet is a wonderful one. And again, I said at the end, I'll show you my email if you'd like some recipes. Violet, you can eat the flowers, you can eat the leaves, so you can saute them, you can put them in a salad. Food is medicine. You can also make beautiful ice cubes or in lemonade. You can do strong teas, put it in your bath. And one of the things I made last year was a syrup, which is very easy to make, a very strong tea, and you can add a sweetener like honey or sugar. And I would put a little bit in my syrup. You put a little bit, in my different seltzer, put it on ice cream. We talked about vinegars, adding different herbs. One thing I did too last year, I put a lot of herbs and covered them with honey to make infused honeys. And violets taste so good, you don't have to take the violet out. Tinctures are usually something I make with alcohol, and I usually save tinctures for things that taste really bad. Because I might take an eyedropper, part of an eyedropper full of something that tastes bad. But violets, I usually don't make tinctures just because they taste so good. But it's even been used as a breath freshener and in litmus paper. So violet's a wonderful spring herb to try and taste. My other absolute favorite, I love dandelions. And so many people cuss and say, oh no, I have dandelions, but they have been used for thousands and thousands of years. And dandelions and one of the other weeds that we're going to talk about actually came here with the Puritans. This was one of their cure-alls. So one of the seeds that they brought with them when they came over to the New World. But even in the 16th century, the Italians said, if you rub dandelions all over, you're going to be welcome and greeted and get whatever you want wherever you go. Nicholas Culpeper was a 17th century. He was a physician, an astrologer, a botanist, and an herbalist. And there's actually books of Culpeper's remedies. But he said this joyous plant was for every evil disposition in the body. Even during the World Wars I and II in America and in Europe, a lot of the roots were ground up as a coffee substitute. And they also used chicory, would get mixed in. And it was publicized as a wonderful, healthful food. Now, dandelions have so many minerals and vitamins. They say if it were a vegetable, it would be one of the top 5 most nutritious vegetables in the entire world. But I think when you see dandelions, you can see why they're thought to bring joy and sunshine and love. There's a Native American Ojibwe maiden story about dandelions. And it talks about the south wind. And the south wind fell in love with this beautiful maiden who had yellow hair like dandelions. But the south wind was kind of lazy, so he laid under a tree and fell asleep. When he awoke, the woman was like a dandelion with a crone with white fluffy hair and was old. He blamed his brother, the north wind, for putting frost on her and turning her into a crone. So sometimes in the summer, you can still hear the south wind sighing in the breeze, thinking of the love he might have had for this beautiful dandelion-haired colored woman. But dandelions too, there's a lot of folklore where if you blow on the fluff, you will get your wishes granted. You will blow all of the seeds off, and you will have the person you love will love you back. And it's also thought in some folklore that the seeds are fairies. So when you blow on them, you release all the fairies. Now, I should warn you, I did find some folklore that said when you blow the seeds off the dandelion, the number left are the number of years you have until you're going to die. So I'm not sure if I'm going to blow hard and get my wishes come true, or if I'm not going to blow too hard and live a long time. But dandelion is a wonderful one. It's not because they are so deep rooted that they connect with the underworld, the ancestors, the dead. And it's thought at one time the world was just populated by fairies and elves. And when the first humans came, we couldn't see them. So they kept getting stepped on. So the fairies changed themselves into bright yellow dandelions, because you can walk on a dandelion, you can step on it, and it always comes back. So every dandelion might contain the soul of a fairy. So watch where you walk. Now, getting to know dandelion, we can use the different parts, the leaves, the flowers, the roots, and even the sap. The sap was used a lot for getting rid of warts. And it's another spring herb, so it's very cooling. Now, the leaves are bitter. They're not as bitter when they're at spring, but they get more bitter. The flowers are very sweet. And one of the recipes I always make to try and convince people that dandelions are good is a shortbread made with dandelions. It's so good. Now, I'm not going to say it's healthy or food is medicine because it's sugar and butter, but it's good. It's also salty and moistening. Now, one of the things with dandelions, they're one of the earliest plants coming up that provide food for the pollinators. So they're a wonderful plant, especially in the early spring when food is scarce for the animals. Now, dandelion is another spring herb, very flowing. Now, it's a diuretic. In France, in fact, they may call dandelion dent de lion, because they think it's like the tooth of the lion. It gives you strength, it gives you courage. Another French nickname for dandelion is pissenlit, pee in bed, which kind of refers to the diuretic. You need to get things flowing. But it is said if you have a child that wets the bed, if they have a dandelion, they eat it on May Day, they won't wet the bed for the year. So dandelions are good for getting things moving. It's another one that's good for your gut flora, the kidneys, the liver, clears infections. And wash in dandelion is actually very good for your skin. If you have acne or rough skin where it's irritated. You can make a strong tea. And when I talk about having a tea with herbs, if you're just having some herbs, a nice cup of tea, you usually put the parts of the herb, the leaves, the flowers, cover them with boiling water for 4 minutes. But now if I want a strong tea that I'm going to use as a wash on my hair, on my body, on my eyes, I'm going to make a tea and let it steep for like 30 to 45 minutes. It may not taste as good, but if I'm using it as a wash, I want it as strong as it can be. So it's also antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, so it's used a lot for arthritis and joint health. Now, the milky latex, as I mentioned, is used a lot to remove warts. Now, one warning though, some of that milky sap, some people may be allergic to it and it may irritate their skin. Now, spiritually, you see the beautiful yellow of the dandelion. It helps let go of fear, trust in your own ability, give you strength. And it's really good for people who love life but never can say no and are so worn out and overextended. And it's also said spiritually that it will enhance your psychic abilities. So it's a fun one to try. Now, ways we can use it. I love using the leaves in salads. You could steam them or saute them, add a little garlic, a little butter, maybe bacon. It makes so many wonderful food. Some people make wine or mead out of it, jelly, fritters. I've made cookies, which are really good. Coffee substitute. So again, tea and infused oil. When I'm doing an infused oil, that would be nice, like for my joints or my achy knees. I just put an olive oil over the flowers and the leaves, and I let it sit about 2 weeks. And then I filter out the plant part, and you have this wonderful massage type oil. We could do again, I add a lot of it to my vinegars because it's just a wonderful, nutritious, very healthy weed. Now, so as you can see, I'm big on weeds. And I was wondering, why don't we like weeds? If it was our ancestors' medicine, I mean, they would actually go and pick the grass out of the areas they were growing all these weeds. And it looks like up until the mid-19th century, a good and healthy lawn was one with weeds because that was your medicine, that was your food. But then as we got more industrialized, people had more time. They also saw rich people tended to have big estates with a lot of green, a lot of grass. And people started saying a green lawn was a good lawn. But when you think about it, you think of how much work a green lawn is. You're using a lot of chemicals. You're pulling out weeds. Every time I drive and I see somebody pulling out dandelions, I just want to go say, oh, don't do that. But there's a newer trend, and I think David was talking last week about lawns and the natural lawn, and it's also called the lazy lawn, which means it's my kind of idea. Adding more plants in, thyme, pollinator-friendly plants, less work, enjoying your weeds, and actually being able to eat your lawn for health and wellness. So it's a newer trend, and I think if you went to the Hudson Valley Garden Show recently, they had a lot in their gym on alternatives to lawns and alternatives for plants. So I'd like to encourage everybody, love your weeds, love your lawn. And just so, not to beat a dead horse, but a weed is this wonderful plant that's mastered every survival skill, except it doesn't know how to grow in rows. And A.A. Milne said, weeds are flowers too once you get to know them. So I love my weeds. Another one of my favorite weeds is plantain. And this isn't the grocery store type of plantain. This is kind of low to the ground, and there's a broadleaf and a thin-leafed plant. And it also has a long history of mythology and stories. It said a maiden gave her heart to a wayfaring man, and being a wayfaring man, he left. So she stayed by the roadside, weeping and waiting for him to return. And the goddess Demeter heard her sad tale, and she goes, you know what, I'll turn you into a plantain, because plantain is underfoot around the entire world. It's everywhere. So you'll be able to wander the world looking for your lover. Now, it did take her a few hundred years before she came to the New World. But again, it was one of those cure-all, wonderful medicinal plants that the Puritans brought with them. And it was called Englishman's foot or white man's foot because it was brought over by the settlers. Now, ancient Saxons also considered it one of their 9 sacred herbs. And this is just a 10th century poem about it. It's even said you can predict your fortune, a boy and a girl. They can collect 2 spikes of the plantain, wrap them up with a dock leaf and put it under a rock. And if it blossoms, it means there will be love. It's like a lot of work, but there will be love. So what parts are we going to use of plantain? Again, we can use all the different parts. It's another cooling herb, but what's really I like about plantain, it first starts drying you, but then it's moistening. And I'll show you my favorite uses and why I love plantain and think everybody should know about plantain if you're outside as a first aid. It's also salty and bitter. But again, a lot of vitamins, a lot of protein, starch. And my favorite uses of plantain. It's a wonderful drying herb. So if I get an insect bite, I get a splinter, I could either just chew on the leaf and put it over the area for about 20 minutes. If I want to be a little neater, I can use a mortar or pestle and grind it up and make a paste with water. But it's a great one to know if you are hiking or outdoors. The other thing, it's a wonderful drying. So I make a tincture out of it because it is bitter. I do throw a few leaves in my salad, but it's not one I'm going to have a tea and sit and enjoy. But it's very wonderful. I make a tincture and it clears up my sinuses. If I have sniffles, it's very drying. And it's good for both dry coughs and wet coughs, hay fever. And one of the lessons I learned is it's very good, irritated eyes. And last summer, I have a rock wall and I put a lot of my invasive herbs there, like mint. Started out, little plants, 25 feet long now. And I'm always pulling out poison ivy. And poison ivy is one of those herbs that's a wonderful teacher. I'm always learning home remedies. I'm always in the poison ivy. And I'm not allergic to it, but I'm always itching. But I was trying to be really good. I put on this gel on my arms and I put on these long sleeve gloves up to my shoulder because I knew I was going to pull out poison ivy. And I was doing so good thinking I'm pretty hot. But the weather was hot. And the first thing I start sweating, I went like this. And as soon as I did it, I knew, wasn't that stupid? And sure enough, about an hour later, my eyes are so irritated. They're puffy. I want to rip them out of my face. And the things I usually use for poison ivy, I can't put on my eyes. It was too strong. So I looked up online, do I need modern medicine? Will I go blind? And it said, no, I'll go away in 2 weeks. So later I'm at a price chopper at the seafood counter. And there's this little old lady working behind the counter. And she's looking at me and she goes, what'd you do? And I told her I got poison ivy on my eyelids, around my eyes. I'm in agony. I want to rip out my eyes. And she looked at me and she goes, have you ever thought of plantain? Not the fruit, the weed. And I go, I love plantain. And she goes, I would make a very strong tea with plantain and chamomile. Good conjunctivitis, good on eyes. Oh, I said, oh, yes. So I went home. I made up a strong tea with chamomile and plantain leaves. Let it soak 45 minutes. I put it in a jar in the fridge. And then I got a gauze pad and I put it over my eye. Oh, so cooling. It was so wonderful. I would put it on every few hours whenever it started feeling like it was itching. And within 2 days, it was totally gone. So I learned a couple things from that experience. One, another use for one of my plant allies. I love plantain. But I also learned you never know where you're going to find your teachers. They might be behind the seafood counter at Price Chopper. So again, it's a wonderful plant if you're hiking, first aid, or in your yard. So we could use some leaves as salad or cook them, steam them or saute them. We can have a tea. We talked about the poultice, but this is where I always make a tincture, especially for the winter time when I have allergies, when I'm sneezing. And when I use alcohol in a tincture to make it, it will last like decades. It's not going to be used up quick. So again, the seeds, one year I went late summer and tried to pick the seeds. They're wonderful for seasoning and a thickener. And I would take the stems, I put them in a paper bag. But I got to tell you, those seeds are tiny. It took an awful lot of seeds for me to be able to get enough to even eat. And you can make fiber out of it too. Now, what I try to do, because when I did my herbal apprenticeships, I did 2 and they were 10 months long, and you went for a weekend for 10 months. And yet so many herbs, you had to go home then and research them and make up your own like materia medica and study them, and you had homework. What I do now is, so it's not overwhelming, every spring and summer, I usually pick one herb I'd like to get to know. And usually it's something that's around me, showing up, big numbers, kind of in my face. So last year I said, I want to know more about yarrow. And yarrow is everywhere around me. And when I'm looking at it, I don't just go to the internet, because now, especially with AI, there's a lot of junk on the internet and you'll get a lot of junk. I go to, and again, at the end, if you like recipes and some of the resources, I have certain favorite practicing herbalists that have good websites, that have good information, good books, newsletters. And I learn about the herb then. How do you use it? Are there any warnings? Internal, external, what can I make with it? And then I try to use it and see, how does it make me feel? So yarrow has become one of my new favorites, plant allies. And there is, again, I love the stories. I love the history. And it said that Chiron, the centaur, he taught Achilles to use yarrow on warriors' wounds. And Achilles, his mother, actually held him up by his heels and dipped him in a bath of yarrow. So he would always be protected. The arrows would bounce off of him. He was safe, because yarrow is a protective herb. Now, the only problem was when she dipped him in the water, she held him by the heels. So around his heel, he was not protected, and he actually died of an arrow in his heel. And that's also where we get Achilles' heel, our weak point, comes from some of these stories. But again, it's been found 50,000 years ago, they found a Neanderthal that in the dental tartar, there was yarrow. It was used for divination, the stalks and stems. Now, the British even say young girls can use it to catch a glimpse of who their future husband will be. So it's a very protective, healing herb. Now, the only thing is, like trying to catch a glimpse of their future husband, there's different folklore. One says you have to go pick your yarrow from a graveyard. One says you have to go to a churchyard you've never been in. And then some of the stories say you cut a piece, you put it in your right sock. Other stories say, no, you tie it on the left leg of your bed. So if any of you are trying it out, we'd appreciate feedback. What method worked for you? But Nicholas Culpeper, herbalist, physician, astrologer, he loved to boil the water, and he used it for all kinds of diseases where there was moisture that needed drying. It was even put over cradles to protect babies from the evil eye and keep witches away. It said if you hang yarrow over your bed, you'll have 7 years of luck. And it was used by Native Americans, and even in civil wars and in battles, it was used because yarrow, one of its wonderful properties, it will stop bleeding. It was also used to prevent infections. So it's been used by our ancestors for thousands of years. So what parts can we use? Well, we can use the leaves, the flowers, and even the roots. And you can see the picture. The only one that grows near it that I want to be able to tell a difference from is Queen Anne's lace. But when you look, you can tell the yarrow is a lot fluffier leaf. The flowers look like individual flowers. So it's easy to identify from Queen Anne's lace. But one of the wonderful things about it, it's drying, it's cooling, bitter, sweet, and pungent. And it's another one that's wonderful for wildlife, for pollinators. It also helps prevent erosion, and it cleans up contamination. In a lawn, it draws up the nutrients. So it makes a wonderful mulch to use and add it to any of your mulch. So I like yarrow because it goes where it's needed. So my favorite use is one of the things I did as I was getting to know yarrow. I took the flowers and leaves and I dried them, and then I ground them up. Now, I do use a mortar and pestle, but I also have a coffee grinder for herbs. And the coffee grinder is quick and easy. The only thing, if you use your coffee grinder on herbs, don't use it for coffee, because your coffee will taste funky and your herbs will taste funky. So I actually have a jar now of Stiffik. I always say that kind of weird, but it will be wonderful if I have bleeding. I could put a little bit of powder on, stop the bleeding. It's another one that's wonderful to know in your yard or if you're out hiking or working, because it does stop bleeding. So if you have nosebleed, you can crush the leaves and actually put them in your nose to stop the bleeding. You can put them on bruises. It's good on a sprain. Again, you can either slap it on, mix it with a little water so it sticks better, because it brings the blood to the surface. So it will help with swelling and bruising. The other thing, I made a tincture of it because it doesn't taste really good. I tried the tea, and if I don't feel good, I'm probably not going to be drinking the tea. But I made a tincture, and it's one of those, it will induce sweating. So if I have a fever and I want to sweat to clear out the fever, the tincture would be wonderful. I could have tea and sip tea, get sweating, and get rid of the fever. But for me, the tincture's easier. It's good for asthma, hay fever. Another one that's good for your digestion, and it makes a wonderful hair rinse, a strong tea for hair loss and make your hair shine. It's also a wonderful one for sore throat, inflamed gums, things like that. And again, spiritual, when we're talking about spiritual, it's an incredibly protective herb that protects you from negativity, reduces stress. And it's also good for people who do too much on computers and under lights and aren't as connected with the outdoors. And I always have different warnings. And I usually say if you're on different medications, you should always work with your healthcare physician, because some of these work really well and you don't want them interacting with medicine you're already taking. So again, it can cause an allergic reaction, but when I talk about these herbs, the allergic reaction tends to be itchy eyes, irritated skin. As not, you're going to go into shock. You can be like, oh, yeah, that's not for me. It's a little scratchy. So again, ways to use it. And of course, I haven't bled since I made my stipit because I was going to try that. I have a tincture for fevers. Another one that might be nice is to infuse oil and then you add a little beeswax, it makes a nice salve. That would be nice to have around too if I have a sprain or a bruise. I can just put the salve on. So it's actually used in liqueurs and used in different ways as well as a preservative. The next to the last favorite herb I just want to go over is elder. I love elders. Now, elders have always been traditionally an herb of birth and death, new beginnings, transformations, and changing. Now, it's said that in the elder, the tree is inhabited by the elder mother. So whenever you pick elder or go to use it, you should always give thanks and prayers for using it. And it's said that you should not burn elder because, again, will bring bad things to you. Now, it was even used if you were a Harry Potter fan. Remember the elder, the magic wand? And it said if you put it on the edge of your herb garden, it will protect you and your land. In your home, it's going to bring happy marriage and happy children. But it's another herb that hospitals used in the 1900s in jam because of all the minerals, the vitamins, to improve digestion and help with a regular elimination. And I think the nice part about elder, it tastes good. So many of these other ones are like, they don't taste so good. But the flowers you can make a lovely tea out of. So many things eat the berry. And when I first moved out, I live outside Troy as you're heading towards Grafton, and I moved out there in 2015, and I saw an elderberry bush on the property, and I was so excited. I was waiting and waiting for the berries in late summer to turn a good dark color. I went running down them to harvest them. There's nothing there. They're always eaten. So I did try to plant some more elderberry. They're just little now. And I want to share them with things, but I hope I get left a little bit. And you will see a lot of elderberry. You can usually tell when you start seeing the flowers in June. They like water. Not in the water, but they're usually on stream banks, the edges of roads, along farm fields where there's runoff. But again, incredibly healthy for you, vitamins. And elderberry, if I'm using it for health and wellness, a lot of people use it to, that should say induce sweating. the lower fevers, but it's an incredible one for your immune system. So I always make a lot of jars of elderberry syrup. And again, if you'd like the recipe, you can do it in your Instant Pot. You're basically making a very strong tea and then adding some honey. But it tastes good, so you can have some every day. You can put it on your food. Food is medicine. And one year I tried making some elderberry gummy bears. And my family gets weird things for Christmas. So I gave them a jar of elderberry gummy bears. And I said, just take a couple a day, good for your immune system, everything else. But in about 10 minutes, there are no elderberries left because it was like Swedish fish you kept eating. But at least they're so good for you. I really like it for ragweed. I get a little ragweed fever, hay fever at the end of the summer. And I usually use that or goldenrod tincture. But again, aches, pains, eye health. So we can use it. This one is wonderful as food, as medicine, because it tastes so good. Now, you don't eat raw berries. The raw berries will give you upset stomach and nausea and diarrhea. You'll spend a lot of times in the bathroom. So when we use the berries, we use the dried ones. And most of the things we're making a tea, a syrup. We're not actually eating the berries. Again, wonderful. I throw it in vinegars. I'm going to try it. I want to make a strong tea and see if it helps fading colors. Now, the last one I want to talk to you is about one of my favorite herbs. Remember, I said an herb might be a tree, the pine tree. The pine tree is just, I'm talking about Eastern white pine here, but you can use any type of pine except YEW. The YEW, that type of pine is toxic. But we can use spruces, we can use the white pines. And the white pine is called the Great Tree of Peace for a reason. In the Iroquois Confederacy, at one time, there was a lot of strife, a lot of fighting between the nations. So the Great Peacekeeper was sent, and he came and he pulled out a huge Eastern white pine tree, the Tree of Peace. And he had all the nations throw their weapons down the hole into the rivers of the earth. So that would wash away the negative energy and the hatred. He then put an eagle on the top of the tree to see far and wide if there was ever any danger. And then he sent out roots in each direction, east and west, north and south, so that all the peoples of the world could always come together under the great tree of peace, the pine tree, and be as one. Now, the Haudenosaunee, I don't know if I say that right, but they also said if you look at the Eastern white pine, the 5 needles represent the family, and the families are joined together to the twig, which is their clan. And the clan attaches the twigs to the branches. So these are the nations. And the branches attached to the tree. Again, unity. Everybody is one. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried, have you ever heard of forest bathing? I started out in Japan, and around where I am now, there's some arboretums and some nature groups that do forest bathing. And it's usually a silent meditative walk through the woods, through the pines, and you can just feel the clearing. You can feel the energy. So I did my first one last fall at an arboretum. And it was kind of funny because there were some little kids. So I'm not sure it was a silent meditative walk, but it was a joyous, fun walk that we walked through the forest. And you can feel it opening up. You can feel the clearing. And pine cones have always been used, as well as needles, as incense, smoke, for cleaning, keeping away evil. It encourages you to connect to the heavens, but still be grounded to the earth. It helps you accept yourself, forgive yourself, and feel peace and happiness. So again, we can use all the parts. The pitch is wonderful if you have a cut or a bruise. The only thing with pitch is produced when the tree is healing a wound. So you don't want to take all of it because it's healing the tree as well. But it's a beautiful, cooling, moistening, and drying herb. And evergreens are used in so many ways by people, by wildlife. And I have tried making strong teas out of pine. Okay, I had to add some honey. It wasn't probably my first choice. But one of the things coming up in the spring, spruce trees get that little new growth, the buds. They taste like citrus. They taste so good. You can make teas. You can make an herbal honey where you cover the buds or even pine needles with honey and leave it a few weeks. The only thing that's a pain with infused honey, if it were the little spruce buds, I'd probably leave it in the honey because they taste good. But I made some infused honey with the needles. That was such a pain to get them back out of the honey. And they're stiff, so I didn't want to leave them in. But I have made different things with pine. I've made body creams and lotions. I've made boot powders. It's an incredible one. I always think of first, respiratory, very cleaning, expectorant, bronchitis. It's also a very calming, sleeping, nerves, blood, and just as a good tonic. So again, I have made cookies with pine. You can butter, teas, syrups. We can put some in our vinegar, incense sachets. So there's so much we can even do an herbal steam. If I'm really stuffed up, you boil water, you put some good herbs in, like our thyme, and thyme, oregano, rosemary. They're very clear. And put my head over it with a towel, and it was just beautiful clearing. So I'm going to stop there because otherwise I keep going for days on my favorite